Washington Journal continues.
We want to welcome Melody Barnes, who spent a number of years on Capitol Hill and now serves as the Executive Vice President for Policy at the Center for American Progress. Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Steve. It's nice to be here.
We'll talk more about the center in a moment, but let's discuss the 100-hour plan that was put forth by Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi, the incoming Speaker. What is that?
Well, before the election, actually, Congresswoman Pelosi said, she said, I'm going to drain the swamp. If elected and I become the Speaker of the House of Representatives, we're going to drain the swamp in the first 100 hours, which I think most people are thinking it will take about 3 days. It'll actually be about 3 weeks of congressional business time. And they plan to go forward with a series of proposals, raising the minimum wage to $7.25, enacting the 9/11 Commission recommendations, going to pay-go rules, which actually means that before you put an initiative forward, you've got to figure out how you're going to pay for it and come up with some set-asides for that, or to make sure that it's revenue neutral. So there are a series of proposals like that, stem cell research, that they're going to go forward with, things that the American people have said that they really want.
Let's take one issue that's been getting a lot of attention, the minimum wage. You just mentioned that President Bush had said in the past he would veto any plan to increase the minimum wage. What will happen?
Well, I think the president has to have listened to what the American people said back a few weeks ago on Election Day, that people are hurting all over the nation. You look at Ohio in particular, you look at the 6 living wage ballot initiatives that all passed with resounding, overwhelming majorities. People are desperate for this kind of change. Congress has the votes to pass this in both houses. I think he's going to receive a whole lot of pressure to sign such a bill, and he'll find himself going against the American public if he decides to veto it.
The so-called congressional earmarks, what will happen?
Well, you know, earmarking reform is something that people have been talking about for a long time, and in fact, there are conservatives, I think the conservative wing of the Republican Party, that is really dissatisfied with Congress, that also says we've got to do something about earmarks. So I think there are going to be some serious steps taken to address that issue as well, and to try and bring the budget under control.
We had a call on this in our first 45 minutes in the story this morning from the Baltimore Sun. It's an AP story that the president is considering lifting oil and gas drilling ban in Alaska. The details are that the president looking at lifting this ban on oil and gas off the waters of Alaska's Bristol Bay, home to endangered whales and sea lions and the world's largest salmon run. The White House confirming over the weekend that, in fact, he is considering taking this step.
Well, you know, often when people talk about this issue, Steve, they focus on the whales and the sea lions, which are important, and they try and make it a, you know, the people versus the sea lions kind of an issue. When in fact, the reality is that we can't drill our way out of our current energy problem. We absolutely can't do it. What we've got to do is focus on some clean, renewable energy, reduce our dependence on oil, go the way the rest of the world seems to be going, which will also affect our climate, will also provide new jobs for the country. This is a win-win-win if we go in the direction that's opposite the direction that the president seems to want to take us in.
The first story that received a lot of attention after the election, the so-called Democratic infighting between John Murtha, Steny Hoyer, and Nancy Pelosi. Was that a mistake?
Well, I think that Congresswoman Pelosi, one of the things that we know about the new speaker is that she is very loyal, that she, like other people coming into a new position, wants to surround herself with a team of people that she considers to be the team that she wants to work with. At the same time, we know that she's worked with Congressman Hoyer for a number of years. Her caucus said this is a team that works, and I think she's saying, now I'm ready to go forward with this team, the team that my caucus has said to me they want to lead us in the 110th Congress.
We're talking with Melody Barnes, who is with the Center for American Progress. You can email us, journal@cspan.org. The numbers will continue to be on the bottom of the screen. We are dividing our phone calls between Republicans, Democrats, Independents, and if you're watching us outside the United States, that number to call is 202-628-0184. What is the Center for American Progress? Who funds it?
Sure. The Center for American Progress is a 3-year-old research institute and think tank. And unlike a lot of such institutions, I know the word think tank often makes people's eyes glaze over, but I think we do something pretty unique. We have a very hefty policy component to our work, coming up with new ideas for the long term, also addressing what's going on day to day. We also have a very hefty communications department that helps drive those ideas out into the American public. So not only do we write reports, not only do we have a great website that people go to, a great blog called Think Progress, but we also use film and the policy issues that film and documentaries raised to engage new people into these issues. We have a very hefty youth component to our work, engaging college students and college-age individuals around the country and trying to transform the country.
I'm pulling up this headline in the New York Times this morning because it says that Hillary Clinton is signaling her intent to run for president. And some have said that the Center for American Progress, chaired by John Podesta, who served in the Clinton administration, is in fact a shadow government for the Clinton administration.
We've been called lots and lots of things. I think that if you look at those who work at the Center for American Progress, you'll find that we come from Capitol Hill. Some of us worked in the White House. Some of us worked in the private sector. People have worked for a number of members of Congress, including Senator Clinton, and have benefited and brought that expertise to the table. But we're not a shadow government for anyone. We, in fact, are trying to drive the agenda forward, trying to create a more progressive America. We work with people on both sides of the aisle, and we'll continue to do that going forward.
Let's get to your phone calls. Harrison, Arkansas. Good morning for Melody Barnes.
Yes. Good morning, Mrs. Barnes.
Good morning.
I'm a lifelong Democrat. I think it's on my birth certificate. But we need to rethink our first domestic in illegal immigration. I'm an employer, and I find as I meet my federal requirements, I have to compete with illegal immigration, people who will work very cheap, paid cash. And then, primarily, we need to think our foreign policy with things like Lebanon and Israel. Hezbollah was at work trying to win the hearts and minds of the people there. And when Israel stepped in over a kidnapping, they devastated that country, and they had the full support. And Steny Hoyer is one of them that did. And I'd remind you that on the southern border, thousands of people here between Mexico, thousands of people have been killed. There have been beheadings. There have been tunneling under the country. And we've practiced a patient diplomacy with Mexico. And yet in Lebanon, we allowed, with 25,000 American citizens there, we allowed the pounding of the Lebanese people. And it's almost, you know, we didn't see the value of not Hezbollah, but the Lebanese lives that were being lost because of the support for Israel in such a way that we'll not question in any of their intentions, and I think the world sees this. Now, I'm not anti-Semitic, but I have been. I went to Bob Jones my freshman year, and I saw how they supported Ian Paisley against the Irish.
Thank you, caller. By the way, Julia Shoker will be joining us from the Carnegie Endowment for Peace in about an hour and a half on that very issue. But did you want to respond?
Well, I think particularly with regard to the immigration point, as we know, there was an immigration bill that was moving through the 109th Congress. There was a Senate bill sponsored by a bipartisan bill by Senators Kennedy and McCain that had a lot of support, and included in it one of the things that the caller was talking about, tough sanctions for employers that were not obeying the law. And I think many people don't know all of the good things that were in that immigration bill. They focused on the road to the path to citizenship and the debate over that piece of it. But in fact, it did provide tough crackdowns on employers to make sure that employers like the caller would have a fair and level playing ground on which to play. And I'm hopeful that in the 110th Congress that this issue will come up very quickly, and they'll move it and pass it and send it to the president, who says that he supports it.
You write in your memo on the 100 hours in the House and the Senate that Congress needs to regain control in Iraq, reduce the threat from global terrorist networks. A lot of attention on the Baker Commission report out this week. The cover story of Newsweek has Lee Hamilton and Jim Baker on the cover asking the question, will Bush listen? My question is, too much attention paid on this Baker Commission? Are we putting too much into this one study group?
No, I don't think so. I mean, one of the important things about the Baker-Hamilton study group is that it finally, that along with the election, I think is finally starting to shift the debate on this issue. And in fact, one of the reasons that we are particularly interested in the Baker-Hamilton report at the Center for American Progress is that what we're hearing, if the rumors are true, seems to reflect a lot of what we've been saying in a report we put out called Strategic Redeployment, Strategic Redeployment 2.0. So we're quite interested in it. We hope that the president is now ready to listen to other ways of going forward than his kind of my way or the highway course of action that has gotten us into the dilemma that we face today.
From the New York